Kamala and I both know that all folks are looking for, as my dad would say, is an even shot. Just give me a shot, a fair shot, a shot at making it. And it'll be the work of our administration to make sure they get a fair shot. Working families need someone on their side in this nation because they certainly don't have anyone in the president now on their side. That's going to change in the Biden-Harris administration. It's going to be gratifying to see the strong, enthusiastic reaction to Senator Harris as our next vice president. You know, it comes from people all over the country. It's already occurring all over the country, all ideological views, all backgrounds. Events, of course, we are predictable, some of them. It comes from all over except, of course, from Donald Trump's White House and his allies. You all knew it was coming. You could have set your watches to it. Donald Trump has already started his attacks, calling Kamala, quote, nasty, whining about how she is, quote, mean to his appointees. It's no surprise, because whining is what Donald Trump does best, better than any president in American history. Is anyone surprised Donald Trump has a problem with a strong woman or strong women across the board? We know that more is to come. So let's be clear. If you're a working person, worried about whether or not you'll have a job to go to, whether or not you'll be able to pay your mortgage, pay your rent, worried about the poison in the air you breathe, the water you drink, worried about your civil rights, even your basic right to dignity, which is under attack with this administration. Kamala Harris has had your back, and now we have to have her back. She's going to stand with me in this campaign, and all of us are going to stand up for her. On January 20th, 2021, we're all going to watch Senator Harris raise her right hand and swear the oath of office as the first woman ever to serve in the second highest office in America, in this land. And then we're going to get to work fixing the mess that President Trump and Vice President Pence have created, both at home and abroad, through 4 years of mismanagement and coddling of terrorists and thugs around the world. Not only will America dig itself out of this hole they put us in, we're going to build back, and we're going to build back better. We have a public health crisis while he's in court trying to do away with health care. With more than 5 million reported infections, 165,000 people dead and climbing as a consequence of COVID-19. And still, months later, no real leadership or plan from the President of the United States how to get this pandemic under control. No real help for the states and local governments trying to fill the vacuum of leadership from the White House. No real help for children and educators, for small businesses and frontline workers that they're ones holding our country together. Instead, he's issuing executive orders and making promises that in the end will defund the Social Security system while insisting that this virus will disappear. The Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration will have a comprehensive plan to meet the challenge of COVID-19 and turn the corner on this pandemic. Masking, clear science-based guidance, dramatically scaling up testing, getting states and local governments the resources they need to open the schools and businesses safely. We can do this. We just need a president and a vice president willing to lead and take responsibility. Not as this president says, it's not my fault. The governor should thank me more. As that old saying goes, give me a break. We have an economic crisis with more than 16 million Americans 16 million still out of work. Donald Trump is on track to break another record, on track to leave office with the worst jobs record of any American president in modern history. But instead of doing the hard work of meeting face-to-face with congressional leaders, Democrats and Republicans in the White House, like every other president has done in a crisis, to get Americans the relief they need and deserve, Donald Trump is on the golf course. If I told you this 3 years ago, you'd look at me like I was being crazy. He hasn't even met with the leadership. He doesn't have time, it appears. We have a climate crisis that Donald Trump refuses to even acknowledge. When he thinks about climate change, all we hear is the word hoax. The Biden-Harris administration is going to meet the climate crisis, protect the health of the American public. And along the way, we're going to deliver one word: jobs, good-paying jobs. We have a racial justice crisis. Donald Trump seeks only to inflame it with his politics of racist rhetoric and appeals to division. You know, today is not only the day I'm proud to introduce Senator Kamala Harris as the vice presidential nominee of the Democratic Party. It's also the 3rd anniversary of that terrible day in Charlottesville. Remember what it felt like to see those neo-Nazis? Close your eyes. And those Klansmen, white supremacists, coming out of fields, carrying lighted torches, faces contorted, bulging, veins, pouring into the streets of a historic American city, spewing the same anti-Semitic bile we heard in Hitler's Germany in the 30s. Remember how it felt to see a violent clash ensue between those celebrating hate and those standing against it? It was a wake-up call for all of us as a country. For me, it was a call to action. My father used to say, silence is complicity, not original to him, but he believed it. At that moment, I knew I couldn't stand by and let Donald Trump, a man who went on to say, when asked about what he thought, he said there were very fine people on both sides. Quote, very fine people on both sides. No president of the United States of America has ever said anything like that. See him continue to attack everything that makes America, America. I knew we were in the battle for the soul of the nation. That's when I decided to run. And I'm proud now to have Senator Harris at my side in that battle because she shares it with the same intensity I do. For she's someone who knows what's at stake. The question is, for all Americans to answer, who are we as a nation? What do we stand for? And most importantly, what do we want to be? You know, someone who knows that the future of this country is limited only by the barriers we place on our own imaginations, because there's nothing Americans cannot achieve when we put our minds to it, when we do it together. One of the reasons I chose Kamala is because we both believe that we can define America simply in one word: possibilities. Possibilities. Let me say it again. Possibilities. That's America. That's what sets this nation apart. Is that everyone, the ability for everyone, and we mean everyone, to go as far and dream as big as hard work and their God-given ability will take them. When I agreed to serve as President Obama's running mate, he asked me a number of questions, as I've asked Kamala. But the most important was, he said to me, he asked me what I wanted, most importantly. I told him I wanted to be the last person in the room before he made important decisions. That's what I asked Kamala. I asked Kamala to be the last voice in the room, to always tell me the truth, which she will. Challenge my assumptions if she disagrees. Ask the hard questions, because that's the way we make the best decisions for the American people. I got a chance to spend some time at my home today with Kamala and Doug. And I want to thank them. I thank them publicly for agreeing to join and take this journey with Jill and me. Doug, you're going to have to learn what it means to be a barrier breaker yourself in this job you're about to take on. America's first, second gentleman. And although they're not with us here today, I want to thank Ella and Cole as well. I had a chance to speak to Doug's mom and dad and to Ella and Cole. And we're going to get our kids together to let them know what's coming. My grandchildren are about the age of their children. I got to speak to them. My campaign has always been a family affair, every campaign I've run. So I've got some news for you. You're all honorary Bidens. And here's the best part. Kamala, you've been an honorary Biden for quite some time. You know, I came first to know who Kamala was through our son, Beau Biden. They were friends. They served as attorneys general at the same time. They took on the same big fights together. Kamala in California, Beau here in Delaware. Big fights that helped change the entire country. I know how much Beau respected Kamala and her work, and that mattered a lot to me, to be honest with you, as I made this decision. So now we need to get to work, pulling this nation out of these crises we find ourselves in, getting our economy back on track, uniting this nation, and yes, winning the battle for the soul of America. My fellow Americans, now let me introduce to you, for the first time, your next Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. Kamala, the floor is yours.
What do you want? Here you go. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. As I said, Joe, when you called me, I am incredibly honored by this responsibility, and I'm ready to get to work. I am ready to get to work. After the most competitive primary in history, the country received a resounding message that Joe was the person to lead us forward. And Joe, I'm so proud to stand with you. And I do so mindful of all the heroic and ambitious women before me, whose sacrifice, determination, and resilience makes my presence here today even possible. This is a moment of real consequence for America. Everything we care about, our economy, our health, our children, the kind of country we live in, it's all on the line. We're reeling from the worst public health crisis in a century. The president's mismanagement of the pandemic has plunged us into the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. And we're experiencing a moral reckoning with racism and systemic injustice that has brought a new coalition of conscience to the streets of our country, demanding change. America is crying out for leadership. Yet we have a president who cares more about himself than the people who elected him. A president who is making every challenge we face even more difficult to solve. But here's the good news. We don't have to accept the failed government of Donald Trump and Mike Pence. In just 83 days, we have a chance to choose a better future for our country. So, Joe, Dr. Biden, thank you for the trust you've placed in me. Jill, I know you will be an incredible First Lady. And my husband, Doug, and I are so grateful to become a part of your extended family. And ever since I received Joe's call, I've been thinking, yes, about the first Biden that I really came to know, and that, of course, is Joe's beloved son, one of his beloved sons, Beau. In the midst of the Great Recession, Beau and I spoke on the phone practically every day, sometimes multiple times a day, working together to win back billions of dollars for homeowners from the big banks of the nation that were foreclosing on people's homes. And let me just tell you about Beau Biden. I learned quickly that Beau was the kind of guy who inspired people to be a better version of themselves. He really was the best of us. And when I would ask him, where'd you get that? Where did this come from? He'd always talk about his dad. And I will tell you, the love that they shared was incredible to watch. It was the most beautiful display of the love between a father and a son. And Beau talked about how Joe would spend 4 hours every day riding the rails back and forth from Wilmington to Washington so he could make breakfast for his kids in the morning and make it home in time to tuck them in bed each night. All of this so 2 little boys who had just lost their mom and their sister in a tragic accident would know that the world was still turning. And that's how I came to know Joe. He's someone whose first response when things get tough is never to think about himself, but to care for everyone else. He's someone who never asks, why is this happening to me? And instead asks, what can I do to make life better for you? His empathy, his compassion, his sense of duty to care for others is why I am so proud to be on this ticket. And Joe and I, yes, we are cut from the same cloth. Family is everything to me, too. And I cannot wait for America to get to know my husband, Doug, and our amazing kids, Cole and Ella. Because whether I'm cheering in the bleachers at a swim meet, or setting up a college room dorm, or helping my goddaughter prepare for her school debate, or building Legos with my godson, or hugging my 2 baby nieces, or cooking dinner, Sunday dinner, my family means everything to me. And I've had a lot of titles over my career, and certainly vice president will be great, but Mamala will always be the one that means the most. And you know, my mother and father, they came from opposite sides of the world to arrive in America. One from India and the other from Jamaica, in search of a world-class education. But what brought them together was the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And that's how they met, as students in the streets of Oakland, marching and shouting for this thing called justice, in a struggle that continues today. And I was part of it. My parents would bring me to protests strapped tightly in my stroller. And my mother, Shamala, raised my sister Maya and me to believe that it was up to us and every generation of Americans to keep on marching. She'd tell us, don't sit around and complain about things, do something. So I did something. I devoted my life to making real the words carved in the United States Supreme Court, equal justice under law. And 30 years ago, I stood before a judge for the first time breathed deep, and uttered the phrase that would truly guide my career and the rest of my career. Kamala Harris for the people. The people, that's who I represented as district attorney, fighting on behalf of victims who needed help. The people, that's who I fought for as California's attorney general, when I took on transnational criminal organizations who traffic in guns and drugs and human beings. And it's the people who I have fought for as a United States Senator, where I've worked every day to hold Trump officials accountable to the American people. And the people are who Joe and I will fight for every day in the White House. And let me tell you, as somebody who has presented my fair share of arguments in court, the case against Donald Trump and Mike Pence is open and shut. Just look where they've gotten us. More than 16 million out of work. Millions of kids who cannot go back to school. A crisis of poverty, of homelessness, afflicting Black, brown, and indigenous people the most. A crisis of hunger, afflicting 1 in 5 mothers who have children that are hungry. And tragically, more than 165,000 lives that have been cut short. Many with loved ones who never got the chance to say goodbye. It didn't have to be this way. 6 years ago, in fact, we had a different health crisis. It was called Ebola. And we all remember that pandemic. But you know what happened then? Barack Obama and Joe Biden did their job. Only 2 people in the United States died. 2. That is what's called leadership. But compare that to the moment we find ourselves in now. When other countries are following the science, Trump pushed miracle cures he saw on Fox News. While other countries were flattening the curve, he said the virus would just, poof, go away. Quote, like a miracle. So when other countries opened back up for business, what did we do? We had to shut down again. This virus has impacted almost every country. But there's a reason it has hit America worse than any other advanced nation. It's because of Trump's failure to take it seriously from the start. His refusal to get testing up and running. His flip-flopping on social distancing and wearing masks. His delusional belief that he knows better than the experts. All of that is reason, and the reason that an American dies of COVID-19 every 80 seconds. It's why countless businesses have had to shut their doors for good. It's why there is complete chaos over when and how to reopen our schools. Mothers and fathers are confused and uncertain and angry about childcare and the safety of their kids at school, whether they'll be in danger if they go or fall behind if they don't. Trump is also the reason millions of Americans are now unemployed. He inherited the longest economic expansion in history from Barack Obama and Joe Biden. And then, like everything else he inherited, he ran it straight into the ground. Because of Trump's failures of leadership, our economy has taken one of the biggest hits out of all the major industrialized nations, with an unemployment rate that has tripled as of today. This is what happens when we elect a guy who just isn't up for the job. Our country ends up in tatters, and so does our reputation around the world. But let's be clear, this election isn't just about defeating Donald Trump or Mike Pence. It's about building this country back better. And that's exactly what Joe and I will do. We'll create millions of jobs and fight climate change through a clean energy revolution. Bring back critical supply chains so the future is made in America. Build on the Affordable Care Act so everyone has the peace of mind that comes with health insurance. And finally, offer caregivers the dignity, the respect, and the pay they deserve. We'll protect a woman's right to make her own decisions about her own body, root out systemic racism in our justice system, and pass a new Voting Rights Act, a John Lewis Voting Rights Act, that will ensure every voice is heard and every voice is counted. The civil rights struggle is nothing new to Joe. It's why he got into public service. It's why he helped reauthorize the Voting Rights Act and restore unemployment discrimination and employment discrimination laws. And today, he takes his place in the ongoing story of America's march toward equality and justice as the only who has served alongside the first black president and has chosen the first black woman as his running mate. But as Joe always points out, this election is about more than politics. It's about who we are as a country. And I'll admit, over the past 4 years, there have been moments when I have truly worried about our future. But whenever I think that there is a reason for doubt, whenever I've had my own doubts, I think of you, the American people, the doctors and nurses and frontline workers who are risking your lives to save others, the truck drivers and the workers in grocery stores, in factories, in farms, working there, putting your own safety on the line to help us get through this pandemic, the women and students taking to the streets in unprecedented numbers, the dreamers and immigrants who know that families belong together, the LGBTQ Americans who know that love is love, people of every age and color and creed who are finally declaring in one voice that, yes, Black lives matter. All across this country, a whole new generation of children is growing up hearing the cries for justice and the chants of hope on which I was raised, some strapped into strollers of their own. And trust me, it's a song you'll never forget. So to everyone keeping up the fight, you are doing something. You are doing something great. You are the heroes of our time. And you are the reason I know we are going to bring our country closer to realizing its great promise. But to do it, we'll need to work, organize, and vote like never before, because we need more than a victory on November 3rd. We need a mandate that proves that the past few years do not represent who we are or who we aspire to be. Joe likes to say that character is on the ballot, and it's true. When he saw what happened in Charlottesville 3 years ago today, he knew we were in a battle for the soul of our nation. And together with your help, that's a battle we will win. Earlier this year, I said I'd do whatever Joe asked me to do. And so now I'm asking you to do the same. So visit joebiden.com to get involved in this campaign and vote, because electing Joe Biden is just the start of the work ahead of us. And I couldn't be prouder to be by his side, running to represent you, the people. Thank you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Former Vice President Joe Biden there making his first appearance with Senator Kamala Harris for the very first time since making her addition to the Democratic presidential ticket official. They walked out not to the typical adoring and cheering crowds, wearing masks, standing socially distanced, on stage. And what everyone is looking for right now is that spark. Do they have chemistry? Do they have rapport? I want to bring in Lester Munson, principal at the government relations firm BGR, who's been watching this as well, worked for many decades in Washington. Lester, what did you make of that first appearance? What stands out to you? Was there a spark?
Well, there was. Those were two great speeches. I think both Biden and Harris did a very good job. I was surprised at the level of attack in both speeches. Clearly, they realized that they don't have a ton of opportunities to talk to the American people because of the pandemic, so they went right on the offense. There were some nice moments talking about Beau Biden and that kind of connection between the two of them. I thought that had a real emotional appeal. And if they can keep that up over the next 3 months, then they are going to look like a really good team.
Absolutely. Early on, the former vice president saying that Kamala Harris is capable of being a vice president from day one. But there really is a transition happening here. She ran her own presidential campaign. Now he is essentially her boss. She's going to have a new, somewhat of a new team. Talk to us about how that transition will actually work now that this is official and there are only 83 days to go and they've got some hard work ahead.
They do have some hard work, and she's going to face some tough questions about her criticism of Joe Biden from the campaign. She was very aggressive in attacking him on civil rights issues. Today, we saw her talk about how important civil rights is to him, so she's clearly trying to make a different case now. I expect her to face some tough questions on that. And how she answers them is going to matter. So it's probably not going to be today. It's probably not going to be next week. We're in a little honeymoon period here for her. But eventually she's going to have to answer those questions. She's also going to face some tough questions on her performance overall during the presidential campaign, during the primaries. She did a great job initially and then kind of faded over time. People are going to be watching her to see if that happens here in the general while she's the vice presidential nominee as well. She's going to have to show some staying power after today and after the convention next week.
Joe Biden took some time to hand over the podium to her. And as you mentioned earlier, the campaign has had a hard time breaking through in this environment. We're in the middle of the pandemic. We're actually standing by right now waiting for the president to speak in one of his daily news briefings. Given that, you know, this is not the typical campaign, we're not hearing those cheering fans as we normally do at these rallies. How do you think they break through over the next 2.5 months?
You know, it's going to be difficult. They'll be looking at the polls, of course, and they're going to try to be reading what issues matter to Americans. I noticed that both Biden and Harris kind of glossed over law and order issues and just talked about reform of policing. I expect President Trump and his campaign to emphasize law and order issues. So they're going to have to figure out a way to talk to the American people about those issues. President Trump wants to make a play for the suburbs, which are the big swing vote nationwide, of course. He's been rather blatant about it and very direct. They're going to have to answer those charges, and they're going to need to respond. And it's going to be hard because there's no audience in front of you. There's no applause. You can't tell if your jokes are funny. You can't tell if you're inspiring people. So they're going to be a little bit in the bubble. And I think it's just going to be kind of a weird campaign going forward for all of us.
Meantime, you have a background in national security issues, foreign policy. Obviously, the president ratcheting up tensions with China is making for a very complex set of circumstances. How do you expect the Biden-Harris campaign to navigate some of those things, given that, much could happen in the next 83 days before the election? And if they indeed they win, they're going to have to deal with a very testy U.S.-China relationship.
That's right. And the interesting thing about the U.S.-China relationship is that it's getting very negative attention from both Republicans and Democrats in Washington, despite some of Joe Biden's earlier statements that President Trump was being a little too tough on China. There's actually a lot of support in the Democratic Party for a tough line on China. I expect that Biden and Harris are going to try to make an argument that the president has not been very competent in the way he's managed the relationship, but they're not really going to disagree with him very strongly about taking a tough line on China. Frankly, it's not something that's sustainable for their base. And as they make the play for working class families, for working Americans, for people who are concerned about what China's doing in the world, they're going to have to be tough, but they're also at the same time going to want to be critical of the way Trump has handled it.
We saw markets rise today. Investors seem to be optimistic that the economy is going to recover. We saw the former vice president lay out his economic plan. What do you think that Harris's addition to the ticket, what kind of impact will she have on economic policy, and how do you expect that to be received by the business community?
Well, she's got some fans on Wall Street who've been vocal in the last 24 hours. The campaign's been doing a good job of getting them activated. But I think we need to kind of step back and realize that at the end of the day, neither Mike Pence nor Kamala Harris are really going to matter that much in this election in November. While she's inspirational in a lot of ways, and this is a historic pick for certain reasons, and there's a lot that's interesting here, at the end of the day, on November 3rd, or whenever people mail in their ballots, they're going to be voting on Trump or Biden. Wall Street has taken a look at Biden. They see him as a moderate. I think there are more concerns with him than there are with Trump, but they're not severe concerns. If it had been a Bernie Sanders campaign, we would have a much different story, frankly.
All right, Lester Munson of the government relations firm BGR, thank you so much for joining us. The former Vice President, Senator Kamala Harris, now sitting for an online fundraiser as we stand by for President Trump to take the podium at the White House. We will take you there live when it happens. Now, we've gotten a lot of reaction over the course of the last 24 hours to the Biden-Harris ticket, including from the most senior African-American in Congress, House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn, who helped turn Biden's campaign around after some of the early debates and not so great performances. Take a listen to Clyburn from earlier today.
She brings to this ticket a smorgasbord of qualifications. She is a sharp debater. We have seen that as she performed as a member of the Judiciary Committee. She is, as I said, experienced in the kinds of backgrounds that we need sensitivity from in our government today. She has won statewide office in California. She has served in the United States Senate. And quite frankly, she has the kind of skill sets that I think are necessary in order to win this year. This is going to be a tough campaign. No matter what we may see, what the polls may be saying, this is going to be a very tough campaign. We found out that just being popular, winning the popular vote, won't get it. We did that before. You got to win in strategic places. And I think that she gives to this ticket the ability to win in those strategic places.
Congressman, as you say, it's going to be a tough campaign. We already saw right away out of the White House a response to Senator Harris's nomination. One of the things that they really are picking on is she tends to be a socialist, they would say. She goes to the radical left. She did take a position of eliminating private insurance and health care during the campaign, although she backed off of that some. Is there a vulnerability there that the Trump campaign can exploit, that she is too far left?
Well, you know, I say all the time, the country does not move on a linear plane. This country is always going back and forth like a pendulum on the clock. It goes right for a while, it goes back left for a while. It went left when they elected Barack Obama. It went right when we elected Donald Trump. And from the moment people got an experience with him, they started back to the left. But I always say, going left to right, right to left, it passes through the center. So this country camps out more in the center than it does to the left or the right. And I really believe that this ticket is right where the country is today, moving back to the left, but more a little center right. It may move center left, but this ticket is right where the country is. And I'm very proud of this ticket.
Congressman, one of the things that commends Senator Harris, at least to some people, is her law enforcement experience, both as a district attorney in San Francisco and then as the California State Attorney General. And that might be helpful to a President Trump who's really addressing the law and order and really pushing that button hard. On the other hand, could it somewhat dampen the enthusiasm from the African-American community, particularly from males, because of her prosecutorial history of being very tough on some young African-American males?
Well, I think that being tough is something that we have to really qualify. It's a quantification that needs to be qualified, in my opinion. I think that when you follow the law, remember, she was adamantly against the death penalty. And some people said that means you're too liberal. And she enforced the laws on the books. And some people would be saying you're too conservative. The fact of the matter is, she was a successful district attorney, a successful attorney general, an effective United States senator, and I think she'd be just as good as vice president of the United States and would make a tremendous chief executive if it were to come to that.
Representative Jim Clyburn there, who was hugely influential in turning Biden's campaign fortunes around at the time of the South Carolina primary. We're going to continue to follow, waiting for the president to take the podium at the White House now. We will take you there live when that begins. But I do, in the meantime, want to get a check of some of the other tech news happening in Silicon Valley. Airbnb reporting that revenue tumbled in the last quarter, but an IPO, going public, is still planned. Bloomberg's Katie Roof has been covering this story and joins us now on the phone. So, Katie, talk to us about the latest numbers from Airbnb. We knew that they wouldn't be great, but they are particularly devastating for a company that was on top of the world 4 months ago.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, and good to be with you, Emily. So my colleague Olivia Carville and myself, we got a hold of Airbnb's financials for the first half of the year, and in particular, the second quarter stood out because it was down, revenue was down 67% year over year, so pretty steep drop. Although when you look at it compared to other travel businesses like Expedia and Marriott, the revenue drop actually wasn't quite as bad as some of the others in the industry. But, certainly not surprising that there was a travel decline, while there were all these restrictions. And, there's still a lot of restrictions. But one thing that was interesting about it is we found out that May was worse than June. They started to see a little bit of a rebound in June. They were still down year over year, but they were down 30% versus 70%. So that is maybe a sign that things are getting better. I know Brian Chesky has talked about that. The CEO has talked about that publicly, that bookings are starting to improve, later in the second quarter. So, perhaps they're hoping that things will improve. They must be, because, our understanding is they're still moving forward with their plans for an IPO for likely later this year.
Interesting. And indeed, I did speak with Brian Chesky towards the end of June about how things were trending. He talked about how more people are wanting to travel close to home, but also acknowledged that travel would never be the same again. In fact, he used the word never, even if we get out of the pandemic, even if there is a vaccine. We also talked about the prospects for going public this year, and he said it's still on the table. Take a listen to how he answered my question of how likely that is to happen this year.
The fundamental questions are, does travel continue to recover? Number two, is it a sustainable recovery, or is it just pent-up demand? Number three, does the market have an appetite for companies listing that lost a bit of appetite after, the IPOs last year, and then WeWork, like people kind of lost appetite a little bit. It seems like appetite's coming back.
So, Katie, the real question is what's happened in the last couple of months, in July, in the first part of August. Anecdotally, I know people are traveling. Some people are getting on flights, but it's a chore. It's a journey, and you're taking a risk. Do we know about how things have been trending over, let's say, the last few weeks?
Yeah, so people close to Airbnb say that they're optimistic because they're seeing that people are essentially booking quarantine houses, that they're getting tired of their apartments and homes that they've been sitting in for the last few months, and they're looking to get away. Although many people aren't flying yet, some people or more people are willing to drive somewhere, and so people are looking at homes. One thing people say is that if you're at an Airbnb home, some people feel that that's safer versus a crowded hotel since there aren't other people around. So, investors and other people close to Airbnb hope that they may recover better than some other aspects of the travel industry.
All right. Well, we'll certainly be watching for more news coming out of this. Katie Roof, thank you so much for your reporting there and sharing that update. I want to turn now to LUCID and the electric car maker with high hopes for next year, working on its newest vehicle, the LUCID Air, a long-range electric car that would be the first EV to have a 500-mile range on a charge. Take a listen to my interview with CEO Peter Rawlinson.
I think range is recognized as the single most significant metric that defines an EV company's technology. And we still need to dispel concerns about range anxiety. So with over 500 miles range, we're creating this technological tour de force, which is right behind me here, which can turn range anxiety into range confidence. And I think this is the last remaining concern that people have with an EV, because an EV is such a superior experience compared with a gasoline-powered car in every other respect.
So who's your target consumer? Are you expecting to take market share from Tesla?
Well, I guess that's inevitable, but our main market consumer, our target consumer, is the driver of an S-Class Mercedes, because we're targeting the luxury segment, and that luxury car segment is dominated by the German grandee marques, BMW, Mercedes, Audi, and they're all gasoline-powered cars. So our target here is the gasoline, the gas guzzlers, these German grandee marques, and specifically the owner today of an S-Class Mercedes.
What are pre-order levels like for the LUCID Air? Give us a number.
Well, I can't disclose a number, but we have a bulging order book, which has grown dramatically even today.
So talk to us then about the proportion of pre-orders and how they are trending. This is a $150,000 car.
Indeed, but it's, this is the world market for a car like this is worth $100 billion a year globally. And, there's no true luxury electric vehicle available. And I'm not being disparaging for Tesla at all, because this isn't a Tesla killer. We can survive alongside Tesla. We can thrive and coexist. This car is overtly aimed at the luxury segment in a way that Tesla's not. Tesla's more a high-tech, disruptive, beautifully engineered car, but it's not true luxury like the LUCID Air. So we can happily coexist in this space and take market share from gasoline-powered vehicles.
So let's put it this way. How many LUCID Air EVs do you expect to deliver to customers in 2021?
Well, in our first year of production, we're going to start production in spring of 21, and I'm targeting 12,000 units in that first production year. So it's probably about 8,000 in the calendar year of 21, to answer your question.
Former Vice President Joe Biden just announced his running mate, Senator Kamala Harris. He's got, a big EV policy, spending on renewables. What's your take on some of his proposals?
I think anyone that promotes renewables and sustainable mobility has got a big thumbs up from me. I think that we cannot continue burning fossil fuels the way we are. And the EV technology is the answer. And it's not just an EV per se, it's the high-tech EV, and that's what we've created, a car which has got more efficiency and can go farther for a given amount of energy than anything else out there. We've been able to achieve that through our in-house technology. It's about efficiency. And the great thing is that we're developing that high technology efficiency for a premium product like this in the future, it can cascade its way down to a mass market car, which is affordable for all. So I applaud any moves in that direction.
So what are your fundraising plans? Will the Saudi Public Investment Fund be involved?
Well, they have been a great partner so far, and they're in for the long term. So they're continuing to fund us. But I wouldn't rule out an additional funding round in order to accelerate the growth of the company, because hot off the heels of this beauty behind me, Lucid Air, we have an SUV off the Air platform, and we need to develop that. And I want to get scale and volume. Air will come into production in 21, and I'm targeting 23 to start production of the SUV.
So what's the timeline for going public, and will it be before or after you start production?
Well, we're looking at going public. Going public is an inevitability. I can't disclose a specific timeline. We're well funded to date, and we're good through to start production. But watch this space.
So talk to us then about the other cars you have in the works. What should we be watching for?
Well, I think we need to approach this with a degree of humility, Emily, because we haven't achieved anything until we start making this car next year. But of course, we have a plan. We have a 10-year plan with a multi-platform strategy. And, I'm an optimist, and I'd like us to be making 1 million cars a year by 27.
Lucid CEO Peter Rawlinson there. More now on what Senator Kamala Harris means for Silicon Valley, now officially on the Democratic presidential ticket with Joe Biden. They have just concluded their first appearance together just minutes ago. I want to bring in Bloomberg's Jeff Taylor, who's been looking closely at Senator Harris's record in California, in Silicon Valley, what her nomination actually means. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, Senator Harris has won 3 statewide elections in California, but what is her relationship with Silicon Valley and her position on big tech in general?
I think the relationship, Emily, is a little bit uneven. During the presidential primary season, when Senator Harris was running for president, Pete Buttigieg was actually the candidate who flashed star power in Silicon Valley and drew enthusiasm from tech executives in the form of campaign contributions and just a desire to be around him and support him. Senator Harris has been critical of some technology companies, Twitter and Facebook. She has successfully fundraised in the industry in the past, particularly when she was running for Attorney General in 2014, when she got big support from Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff and Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky. But, she's not the favorite of the technology industry, never has been, and that brings an interesting dynamic because she's the home state senator.
Jeff, we're standing by now for President Trump to take the podium at the White House. Sure. Biden and Senator Harris came out pretty strong in their first appearance together on some of the president's actions, taking aim at how he has mishandled the pandemic. Obviously, we're very curious about her positions on big tech and antitrust scrutiny, which is something that President Trump has taken on as well. If anything, these companies are facing fire from both sides of the aisle, though potentially for different reasons. What has she said in the past about big tech companies like Facebook? What is her relationship with folks that have historically been pretty active in the political community, like Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg?
Well, she's been especially critical of Facebook as a company. The critical things that she has said about tech have often been centered on that company. She has said she has no idea how much data Facebook is collecting and doesn't think consumers do either, from tracking their location and their IP addresses to following their activities on other websites. She denounced the company for spreading Russian disinformation during the 2016 presidential election. In May 2019, she did an interview with CNN where she said she, quote, would seriously take a look at, close quote, the possibility of breaking up Facebook if she were the president. So, her rhetoric on Facebook has been pretty strong. And that's led, Facebook to try hard to build bridges to both her and Joe Biden. So immediately after Biden named Harris his running mate, Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook, posted a photo of Harris on her Instagram account and said what a great moment it was for black women and girls all over the world, and I'm sure that was sincere, but it probably also reflected a desire, to begin to build a bridge to the Harris-Biden ticket. Sandberg, by the way, is very close to Larry Summers, for whom she used to work, and Larry Summers is, of course, a close Biden economic advisor.
Much has been made of Senator Harris's prosecution record and, of course, her time as Attorney General in California. Why do you think it is that she's not Silicon Valley's or a favorite candidate of Silicon Valley?
I think she's just never kind of sent the vibes and the signals that she's friendly to tech in the same way that Buttigieg did when he was on the campaign trail. And I don't want to overstate it. I don't think that there's a hostile relationship between tech companies and Kamala Harris. She's been offered the opportunity to say that companies like Google and Amazon should be broken up. She's been asked that question multiple times, and she's always deferred when asked that question, sort of moved in a different direction, just saying that they need to be regulated in a way that ensures that American consumers can be certain that their privacy is not being compromised. But I think one thing is kind of critical here, and that is that kind of stepping aside for a moment from the particular relationship between Harris and technology. I mean, if Biden and Harris win, and if Democrats go back to the White House, I mean, I do think that probably means robust antitrust enforcement. I mean, historically, Democrats have pursued robust antitrust enforcement. And I don't think it means that Harris and Biden go after Google and Amazon or go after Facebook or go after Twitter. I think what it means is they turn over the keys of the antitrust division to the cops, who have traditionally run antitrust investigations, and maybe with a little bit more freedom, to range a little bit more widely and be a little bit more expansive in trying to fight anti-competitive practices. So, I mean, it's been very typical for Democratic administrations to have robust and aggressive antitrust enforcement. And looking at these two candidates, Harris and Biden, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be the case going forward.
Jeff, we're standing by now for the president to deliver a news briefing at the White House. Again, we're going to take you there live when it happens. Curious how you expect the next 83 days to play out. 83 days before the election. Obviously, the president has set quite a stage. Obviously, we are in the middle of a pandemic. You cannot campaign the way that you normally do. Actually, Jeff, we see President Trump walking out now, so we're going to listen in to the president.
Appreciate you being here. And good evening. As we continue to confront the China virus, we're rebuilding America's economy like nobody thought possible, actually. We're doing incredibly well. Stock market's up almost 300 points again today. While our economy is performing significantly better than Europe, which people have to understand very strongly, it's performing better than any market anywhere in the world, actually. At the same time, Europe has experienced a 40% higher excess mortality than the United States. And I will say that that's a significant number. We're working with Europe on their difficulties, and we are going to help them all the way. We're doing very well, as you know, in the vaccines and the therapeutics. But think of that. We have the strongest performing economy in the world. We're up, I think it's $9 trillion since March, $9 trillion in value. That's a number that nobody's ever heard of before. We're also getting close to about a 50% number since March, which is incredible. So it's $9 trillion. It's almost 50%. In fact, I think it went above 50% today with the 300-point increase. And it's so we're doing much better than Europe, significantly. And at the same time, Europe has experienced a 40% higher excess mortality than the United States. I just want to mention, because another number of judges were approved recently, will be probably over 300 judges, federal judges, including Court of Appeals judges, approved by the end of my first term. And other than when they added new judges into somebody's term, which happens seldom, but we have more than any. There's a record. Nobody's ever seen anything like this in one term. So we're going to have over 300 federal judges, and that's Court of Appeals judges, and that's just in the first term. It probably will finish out over 300, which is pretty amazing. The stock market's rebound signals a V-shaped recovery, stronger than our competitors anywhere in the world, stronger. If you look, you'll see exactly what we have. We lead the world. Japan is second, but in terms of dollar value, it's not even close. So there it is. A lot of great competitors: Europe, United Kingdom, Japan, China, Hong Kong. The United States is leading the world very substantially. The second slide, you'll see the virus-induced economic contraction in the United States has been far less severe than it was with our peers and peer nations. And you see that right there. There's the United States. And that's despite the fact that we've done more testing than any other nation in the world, that we've done more by far ventilators. We're building thousands and thousands of ventilators a month, and we're distributing them all over the world. We're helping other countries. But despite all of these factors, the shallowest contraction, which is a big deal. I'm sure you'd love to put them in your various media outlets. I know you want to get that out. If you want to leave the room early and do that, that would be fine. The rapid recovery, but it would be nice to report it, the rapid recovery of home builders sentiment points to massive new construction, and we are doing massive amounts of construction of new homes, and that's because people have